This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and I'm the host of the Policy Digest podcast. This is the podcast where we unpack stories of African leaders that are shaping the futures of their communities. And part of that involves advocating for causes that are close to the heart of Africa. And in this specific podcast, we shall continue our podcast series on unpacking the alcohol control bill that was just rejected by the Parliament of Uganda. And in order to do so, we're joined by an advisor to the Uganda Alcohol Policy Alliance, who is none other than Mr. Richard Baguma. Mr. Richard Baguma, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for the opportunity to share. But allow me to say hello to our listeners and to our viewers, and to thank them for patronizing the podcast. That's really, the audiences are the ones who make.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, who make us. But also, I want to say kudos really to SEPA, because it is not every day that you find a non-profit, a non-government institution sustaining such public discourse in these divergent ways. So I also want to commend you and your management.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you as well for the wonderful work you're doing in road safety and in alcohol control, and maybe just so we get into the conversation. So recently Parliament rejected a bill which your coalition was pushing for on the floor of Parliament, which is a alcoholic drinks control bill. Could you share some of your perspectives about what civil society was pushing for in that bill?
So it was, there is evidence, scientific and anecdotal, that alcohol use has a lot of harm to human beings. And this is over the centuries. In fact, if you go to any language, there will be a saying about the harms that people who use alcohol can face. In every language, doesn't matter which continent. Because alcohol is as old a tradition, alcohol use,
as mankind.
As mankind. Yeah, so the harms are known by human beings. But now with the improvement of science meant that the nature of alcohol moved away from what was by tradition. It became industrial, it became commercial, it became profit-oriented, and it became a mass product. So the alcohol producing, marketing companies are global conglomerates. You're talking about billions of dollars. And they have become so powerful that they have for profit, really. And it's okay to look for profit. Yeah.
Yes.
Except where you start harming society. But they have become so powerful that they have the capacity to influence governance, legislation, policy making in very, very strong ways. So that's why things like legislation, things like regulation, things like control become important now. Because the evidence now we have globally, really without debate, that alcohol harm has become a challenge, for example, to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, alcohol is specifically mentioned as something you need to deal with in order to achieve sustainable development.
That's true. Actually, analysis shows that alcohol adversely affects 14 out of 17 SDGs.
Absolutely.
And 54 out of the 169 targets in the 2030 agenda. But just maybe to still ask, so there was so much evidence that an ordinary person would have used to make this decision on implementing that law. Why is it that in the face of this much evidence, people in parliament chose to say, no, we're not going to pass this bill?
Because the circumstances are not ordinary. If it was ordinary people making ordinary decisions, then you would have had, it would not be contentious that you need to legislate, to regulate and control alcohol. There would be no controversy. It would be now the specifics of the regulation. And probably we'll get there. But that the regulation is necessary would not be a problem.
Not a debate.
Would be a given.
So
it tells you that the situation was not ordinary. It was an extraordinary situation. In fact, I do not know anywhere else where an alcohol control legislation has come before a national legislative body like Parliament and it has been totally rejected. I don't know anywhere else. So Uganda is very special. But Uganda also is special in many ways. We are the leading alcohol consumer country in Africa, so we are very special. We are not ordinary.
And maybe legislators don't want to regulate the people who voted them into power.
No, they want to. Otherwise, all the other regulations will not be passing. We see regulations on all other things.
Yeah, that restricts people's freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So how come this one? So that's why I'm telling you that it's extraordinary. And I can say, keeping in the safe space, that the most important decisions on throwing out the alcohol drinks control bill in the Parliament of Uganda a short while ago was not based on technical issues. That the final and most important decision was based on relationships that soured between very powerful individuals that impact on the legislative process. So the disagreements unrelated to alcohol legislation between very powerful individuals affecting the legislative process in Uganda led to the throwing out without debate of the bill. Unprecedented.
Because there was enough evidence that the case was very, very clear. But maybe ask, when I read the Parliament Committee on the Alcohol Drinks Control Bill, it indicated that every year, Nile Breweries Limited, and this is just Nile Breweries, and Uganda Breweries Limited contribute up to 1 trillion annually in tax revenue. When you looked at the main bill, not the minority report, most of the argument was economic, that we would be compromising the consolidated fund, that would be taking about 800,000 people out of employment. What is the opinion of civil society on those very economic arguments that came from the Attorney General, the Committee on Trade, and I think some members of the Health Committee as well?
The Attorney General did not argue for economics.
Okay.
The only economic argument the Attorney General brought was that the bill did not get a certificate of financial implications from the Minister of Finance. That was the only economic. He talked about the piece of legislation being covered by others.
Oh, yes.
He talked about not being consulted by the mover. Those are the reasons he brought. So it's not true also that the Attorney General who I think spoke very powerfully and very
Oh,
movingly,
yes. He was
was talking about economic arguments, because the economic arguments have always been there. Yeah, the economic arguments are the easier ones to deal with, and I don't allow the industry to draw me into economic arguments. Because if alcohol legislation is a killer of alcohol business, Nile Breweries is owned by a conglomerate. Nile Breweries is not a Ugandan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
South African.
So how come?
Yeah.
How come there is an alcohol legislation, alcohol control legislation in South Africa? It is there. I was in South Africa last year for a global alcohol control conference. You can't go to buy alcohol in a South African shop before midday. That's by law. So how come the company has not collapsed at home, where it starts from? So the economic arguments are
looking for uncharted territory in Uganda.
are very untrue. Yeah, and they are not correct. And also, you see, where I have said before on air that the Honorable Attorney General was, with all due respect, unprofessional and disingenuous. Because
to the debate, yes.
How did then Parliament? So Parliament and the presiding officers must be not very clever, according to the Attorney General, for them to allow a piece of legislation that did not get
a certificate of...
But there are rules in the House, how that is done, and it was done by rules. So he was being disingenuous, he was being dishonest. I actually said he was very economical with the truth.
That's diplomatic.
Yes. And I can tell you, some of these things we do when we are in offices, catch up with us. The Honorable Attorney General cannot say that he is not aware of the alcohol problem in this country. He cannot say, no way, I would want to face him on air and tell him, sir, your name is somebody. So let's first get out of your high horse of Attorney General. We come to you, and then we discuss alcohol in our society, around us. Yeah, so very disingenuous. So that's why I tell you that the issues are not what was on the table. The real issues were the issues that were not on the table. And we have to face those issues as alcohol control advocates. And we have to deal with them. Yeah, the underlying issues.
And I think that also begs quite an important question there is, okay, so if people in power are unwilling to create this legislation, then what are the next steps of civil society?
No, they are not unwilling. They are very willing. How did it find how did the piece of legislation find itself before Parliament? If they were unwilling.
Champions of alcohol control.
Yeah.
Volunteered to bring the law.
Let me tell you the power. In your questions, you said the Committee of Parliament.
Oh, yes.
No, the alcohol control law, the Alcohol Drinks Control Bill 2023, was not before a Committee of Parliament. It was before committees.
A joint committee.
Why?
Yeah.
Why don't one ask themselves, how come this piece of legislation needed more than one committee to combine them and
it must have been about 40 to 60 people.
So how come one committee of Parliament, which processes a lot of bills on either side, was incompetent this time to handle this one bill? This was not ordinary. That's why I was telling you when you say ordinary, this was not ordinary. All the processes around this bill were not ordinary. So you can understand the pressures the presiding officer would be under to have to combine committees to process this.
To generate, how do I call it? Enough consent against it. but still,
but you see, also look at the signatures. Look at the signatures of the reports. Less than 51% of the people signed those reports. Combined, the majority and the minority. The pressures around alcohol are not that decision makers don't want
to do it or don't know the harm.
Yeah, the level of intimidation and threat at constituency level. We shall do this, we shall do that for you. Can be very intimidating to many legislators. That's why you see they didn't want to take a side on either way. They didn't sign.
I don't know. Maybe just to interrogate, I follow U.S. politics closely. There are so many regulations around lobbying legislators and the role of money in legislation, corporate resources in legislation. Is it time for us to interrogate how much influence the corporate lobbies in Uganda are affecting legislation? Do you think some candidates are sponsored by some of these lobbies? To what extent does money play a role in thwarting such critical legislation?
No, just not this critical legislation. I think activists, advocates, politicians themselves, everyone has been calling for regulation around political financing, around election financing, around financing of legislative processes. This has been, I think it's been on the table for a while. We need to have regulation, legislation around the financing of politics here. The blackmail that people who want to participate in politics face from business interests. Some of the business interests, like everywhere else in the US, wherever, are illegal business interests. People who are very powerful, but because they are dealing in illegal, commodities, they have a lot of money, and they use fronts. They don't come direct. There is a lot of fronts. They create front groups, and we have seen this, especially in what I call scene-related legislation around tobacco control, around alcohol, around drugs, psychotropic substances. You find a lot of front groups emerging around policy and legislative processes. Very well resourced.
Well facilitated.
And so we know these things, but they're under the radar. But you need to protect. I think it's important that as a country we need to protect our politicians from the very shaky and very crocodile-like behavior of the business interests. Imagine one of the things that for me was very touching was the law around credit, around money lending. You could see the pervasive influence of the money lenders, a lot of them without any regulation, with killer Shylock interest and behavior. And they were interfering with the processes. So we have to protect our politicians from these interests by law and by action. I think so.
I think because not to perhaps construct a parallel where it doesn't exist, but to perhaps predict that there could be a correlation between the way Parliament is not serving the people and corporate interest, and then the fact that we need to do quite a lot in regulating such interest. But maybe going back to the question that we've just finished, there was just something small we didn't finish. I have seen civil society in the Uganda Alcohol Policy Alliance sit back and say, okay, what are the next steps we are going to do? Would you like to shed a bit of light about that? What civil society is planning to do to perhaps see this law get back to Parliament and get a higher chance of success?
First of all, the decision that with or without the law, the work of alcohol control must continue. That is without debate. We have agreed on that this setback of the bill, and it's not the first time we are having a setback with the bill. There was another bill, the Namboze bill, I think that was 2209 or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah. Also games were played around it. It didn't see the light of day.
A decade or so later, it comes back.
The one, the opened bill has had. But why we insist that the work around alcohol control must continue is because the push for the bill actually keeps the matter on the radar. What the alcohol industry would like to do is to take the matter of regulation off the radar. And because that's why you see they would say, oh, we are self-regulating.
Oh, yes. We're having, what do they call them? PR campaigns.
Corporate social responsibility. We are self-regulating. We don't need...
Already. Or they go and regulate the illicit alcohol. I had the argument.
Yeah, and I kept saying, you see, if you don't have a law about a product, how can it be illicit? It's their language. They are coaching a language which they are using to defeat legislation. Because I say, if there's the laws around alcohol control in this country were thrown out, all of them, and said we are going to consolidate and have one law instead of pieces of legislation elsewhere. So they were actually all thrown out. And then we don't have a law. So if something doesn't have a law about it, how can it be illicit? It means it's not illicit.
Ideally, because the law is what determines whether something is illicit or not.
So that language already, the coaching of the language, is intended to distract attention from their product. It is deflecting attention from the harm.
It is strategic framing.
Yes, it's framing in communication. Very strategic framing. To take away the lens from their products to other products.
Yes. Say, for us, we are good.
We are good guys. Why are you even talking about us? But they are the other guys.
We employ 800,000 people. We power the night economy.
We are good guys. So no one says that our product contributes to killing so many. That it's a major contributor to heart disease, to cancers, to to the driving, the crashes.
Yeah, the road safety situation.
They are not talking. They are not saying, because those are the things we're asking for. We're saying, don't advertise to our children. Don't advertise to our children. The most prevalent large-size billboards in Uganda are on alcohol.
Thank you, Mr. Baguma. In the second segment, we're going to come to how the age of consumption for alcohol should be 18, but the statistics show that people are taking alcohol at a very early age, as early as 8.
Absolutely.
Let's come to that in the second segment of this podcast.
You are listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities.
Mr. Baguma, according to the Alcohol Control Report 2022, it was noted that the trends of alcohol use among young people below 18 are higher than the public knows. The first stat says that the age of first use at 8 years, that 53% of alcohol users are below 18, that 70% of students that were surveyed by the report had ever used alcohol, and these students are in secondary schools. In your opinion, why do you think that even when we have legislation which says the age of consent for alcohol is 18, why do you think we have these high rates of alcohol abuse and use among young people?
Let me tell you, Joseph, the first question I ask people is, I want them to educate me about that legislation which talks about 18. I'm not aware of a legislation in Uganda that regulates age of use. No. So every time I go to meetings, people tell me, oh, the age is 18. I say, okay, recite the law. Because
the alcohol industry talks about it explicitly.
That we are in what we call chair-guided.
Chair-guided legislation.
we are in a society of chair-guided. There is no legislation that legislates age. That's what we are trying to introduce in the bill.
You're pushing it to 21?
Yeah, we are pushing it to 21. And why? First of all, every addictive behaviour is regulated globally. But in Uganda, we have a law on gambling. We call it gambling, but they call it gaming, all kinds of nice names. So they equate gambling to football.
Gaming.
Gaming. Don't call it gambling. I told you the framing, the wording, the diction. So the National Gaming Board, not the gambling board.
Not gambling regulation board, yeah. It's gaming board.
So it says 25. You are not supposed to gamble until you are 25. We have the tobacco control law. It says 21. It is the same Uganda, the same parliament.
That created the same
The
legislation.
same parliament has refused any legal age limit on alcohol. Really? So how am I supposed to understand that parliament? So you see, we have precedents because science is very clear. Alcohol is a psychotropic substance, is a brain-altering substance. That is the reason when you take it, you cannot walk straight, you start staggering. You cannot speak properly, you start stuttering or stammering. You cannot drive, that's why they take you off the road. You are a risk to other road users and to yourself because you lose control. You then can vomit what you have eaten. You have a hangover afterwards because it is a body system altering drug. Alcohol is a drug. And it is engineered so. That is why they tell you this one has 14%, this one has 2%. It is engineered. Alcohol does not come by itself. Even traditional alcohol is scientifically engineered. You have to go through fermentation. That's chemical scientific processes. And they know when they want to purify it to warrage, they go and make drums and steam it. The science is known. And the impact on the body is known. So, how do you then create a big volume of clientele? You target them when they are young. Because it's an addictive product. By the time they are adult, they are already hooked. And you have permanent clientele. That's one. But also, it's a replacement, a customer replacement strategy. Because your product is killing off its clients. It's killing off its customers. You need to replace them. Otherwise, you run out of clients. So the industry knows that its product kills the ones who consume it at a certain age. In fact, we know science is very clear that alcohol consumption at a certain level reduces your life expectancy. It's clear. It destroys your organs.
Yeah, so...
This is science. And the industry knows. They are ahead of us in research. So they have to introduce this early to the potential clientele. But what is also more important in countries like Uganda and on continents like Africa is the population age. In Uganda, the median, the average age of a Ugandan now is 17 and a half. We have just had a population census. We have about close to 80% of our population below 40. So you need to catch them early because they will be dying off quickly. So the industry has to target that population. But the other demographic that the industry is targeting very aggressively is the female young youth female.
The young female.
Because that is a virgin market for them. The females have not been as alcohol consuming as the males.
As the males, yes.
Yes. And so the report actually points out the statistics. So
yes.
Why the industry now is going to them is because the empowerment, the education, has brought some to the income levels. So you have to then market directly to them and make the product look as an empowerment product. That is part of the empowerment for you to take alcohol.
It's like a privilege.
Yeah, you are joining the club of strong, well-educated, well-incomed people. So how you do is you sexize alcohol. Get all the glamorous girls and cars and environments and portray them that these ones you can only be part of this if you are using alcohol. If you're a teetotaler, I don't drink now. I used to drink. I started at 13, like the statistics you're talking about. If you are not drinking, then you are not stylish.
Oh, yes.
You are not part of the crowd.
You're not part of
you are dull.
the norm.
You are boring.
Boring, right?
This is the messaging that the industry.
Those who drink are seen as more bored.
Yeah, they are more, you know, you are not clever. How can you not be drinking?
I've seen memes.
Yes.
Even on Capital FM, they run memes on, how come you don't drink alcohol? And I'm like, is that a question?
I mean, like, so
how is that a question?
And the industry has intimidated the media industry because of the finances they give them, which is also untrue, because where you have alcohol regulated, by the way, in the developed world, there is no single country in the developed world that does not have alcohol legislation. And these are the things I say. When I go to these meetings with the industry, I say, tell me, for you are domiciled in Germany, you are domiciled in South Africa, and you are domiciled in Ireland. Those are the three conglomerates. Tell me which country has no alcohol control, which country doesn't regulate age or time. There's no developed country in the world that does not regulate age of consumption and time, and puts the responsibility on the industry that even when you are selling online, you must establish age. This is what we're asking for. So what are we killing? Which industry are we killing? Which income to Uganda are we killing? The messaging is deceptive. And there is no question in my mind that a couple of people in parliament, Baba Tunram.
Yeah.
Let me tell you some of the questions
I'm twisted
around the bill. As of that day, the bill was not on the order paper. The order paper was amended that day.
I heard that. It was the deputy speaker?
The House has a presiding officer who we know is responsible for the order paper. Whether the top one or the deputy one, it's an office which is responsible for the order paper. The members of parliament had been given an order paper which was amended. So they will tell you legally they have powers to amend. So for us, we have to ask morally and socially, why did you amend? Another thing peculiar around that was that it was at the time where the members of the health committee were pro the bill, including the one who was the leader of the minority report, the author. They had been given resources and permission to go out and consult people around the bill. So we have to ask questions around this. Yeah, we have to ask. So
I noticed when Honorable Penn went to the floor, she was like, I've just been informed. Even my assistant had locked the office, but here is what I have. I was like,
it is okay. By law,
you can
this
speak.
bill is the property of Parliament because you have already
submitted it.
But would I be wrong to assume that was manipulation? Would I be out of order
because
to accuse them of selling the country? It's called treason. And I am careful to say them, because every evil fights back. Evil fights back. Corruption fights back. Stealing fights back. Law breaking fights back. So you see, this is what, even when we discuss here, we cast things as questions. We cast things as we don't talk about who.
Yeah, we hypothesize.
We hypothesize. Because of the cruel power and the willingness to deploy that cruelty to some of us who are trying to save society. But for profit and earning, whatever, people will go and sell others.
Since the days of Jesus, people have done that. But maybe just to ask, as we close, still in the Uganda alcohol control report, there is data which shows that some of the highest alcohol consumption rates are in regions that have the highest poverty rates, and I would like to walk you through. Karamoja is like a top scorer at 46%, West Nile at 16%, TSO 14, Elgon 13.8, South Uganda 13.2. Yeah, we can go on and on and on. Is there research to correlate alcohol consumption to poverty in the Ugandan context? And in that sense, there is still research which showed that alcohol is used as a coping mechanism for people who are in situations that needs some form of coping mechanism. Is there research that can correlate poverty in Uganda and alcohol abuse?
I'm not sure about Uganda, but I know there's research generally around the world. So, first is to also find out what are actually the underlying drivers of poverty in those regions. Is it alcohol? If you take the regions that are poor generally in this country, they have had long spells of conflict. Is that a cause? Is that a reason? Yeah. They have had social improvement programs that are targeted to those regions.
Yeah.
Have all ended up in scandals, corruption scandals. So if you have these long conflicts, you have this scandalous
social welfare programs
of their interventions. Is that a way we can also explain away the poverty? And therefore then, alcoholism, high levels of alcoholism in these societies, what is the causal or relationship?
What's the relationship there?
Is it poverty that pushes this, or is it the drinking that pushes this? But let's also take the other better let's say better societies, and we take households. We take the households that are led, the alcoholic addiction individuals. We compare their households and the ones
and the income levels.
What is the welfare of the alcoholic-led households and the ones which are not? Even in the well-to-do societies.
The contrast, yes.
Are they better? They are likely to be worse off. So the alcohol and poverty can be self-reinforcing. But consumption of alcohol in addictive levels generally
is not linked to poverty.
Is not an addition to the improved welfare of a family. There is no village where it is a family of drunkards and it is doing well financially.
Anywhere around the world,
anywhere around the world. So we have to look at those arguments in these contexts. That is why I tell people there is no parent who can encourage, finance, send their child or loved one to be an alcoholic. None anywhere in the world. Even the owners of the beer alcohol companies. If you find a lady, for example, selling alcohol in a bar, she will be the most strict
on her children.
Not to drink.
Even herself, by the way.
If you find a managing director or a marketing officer of a beer company, if they catch you giving their 15-year-old alcohol, they will kill you.
They will kill you.
So they know. So when people throw around arguments around poverty and alcohol, you have to look them in the eye
and see what the argument has in your eyes.
And so it is. It is really being disingenuous
to construct a strong correlation, but I see the contrast of families that are led by alcoholics or that are dominated by alcoholics, whether in poor or rich societies, have the same characteristics everywhere. So I think poverty then becomes the other factor. As we close, do you have any closing shots to the audience?
Yeah. The first one is just be personal and intentional about consuming any type of alcohol. I always give myself as an example. I started drinking at 13. I went to Ontari school, church boy, and started drinking. And starting to drink, no one sits down at 13 or 15 or 18
And
to say, I am now going to start drinking. It creeps on you. First, it's in your face as a positive thing. It's on radio, it's on TV, it's in billboards, it's in all. Now it's online. Presented as sexy, as good as the thing to do. This is evil. And for people in governance to allow this to continue is treasonous. The second thing, it is cheap. And in my view, the industry connives with the people who are responsible for taxes, for regulation, to keep it this way. So it's cheap, very easily accessible, and very heavily promoted to young people. So please, be extremely intentional and careful the way you deal with alcohol. Don't brag, don't deceive yourself that the alcohol you are taking is making you any better. You know internally inside you know you are lying. That's the first thing. The second thing is, can our leaders in Uganda, parliamentarians, district people who have power to do ordinances, local government people have power to do ordinances, the president, our president is expensive. He knows he messages against alcohol, but he allows that lack of taxation, even lowering taxation, continues. You are being treasonous about the generations, and we have a young generation. Don't commit treason when we are in your hands. That's what you are doing, our leaders. And for me, finally, we cannot sit back and pretend that alcohol is not harming Uganda. We cannot. It is harming families. It is harming individuals. Families, you know, some of you come to our rehab centers. Please, let's not pretend about this. Let's talk and voice about alcohol and its harm, and let's be firm. Let us not accept to be intimidated. We shall certainly reach a better place.
Thank you so much for that patriotic guidance to Ugandans, and thank you so much. Send our regards to the Uganda Alcohol Policy Alliance. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Policy Digest, and do well to subscribe to all our podcasting platforms. That's on YouTube, Center for Policy Analysis, that's still on Podbean, Policy Digest, or all your podcasting platforms. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. My name is Joseph, and it was good having you as a host.
Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. For more podcasts, check out our Podbean and YouTube platforms. Thank you.